Yes, and nice to meet some of you. I've met some of you or seen your names in emails or in some sessions that we had last year. So nice to see some of you rejoining. So this morning for the next hour and a half or just about, we'll be looking at some of the main requirements for reporting on the National Inventory Report or GHG inventory. We'll use those two interchangeably. And some of the main reporting requirements, and these come under the modalities, procedures, and guidelines. And these are just the guidelines that the Paris Agreement set out, the Enhanced Transparency Framework set out for reporting what should be in your transparency report. So we'll take a little bit look at the BTR, the main report, and it also mentioned that Suriname will be reporting their BTR with urgency, and then also your next national communication. So these two reports can go together, and so we'll take a look specifically at the national inventory report that should go along as a separate document along with the BTR. And this is just the agenda for the next few weeks. So today we'll be covering an overview of the general process, some of the main reporting requirements. And then this Friday, we'll look at energy data, which refers to electricity and fuel-related data. What are some of the main data requirements and reporting requirements? Followed by transport, the following week, waste, IPPU, and AFALU. Session 6 is AFALU, the agriculture, forestry, and other land use. And so these sessions, the subsequent sessions will be focused on what exactly are the data requirements. So if you had joined our previous sessions in last year, we were looking at the IPCC guidance, and in this case, we'll be looking at what are the main data requirements to get things moving immediately for your BTR preparation. And just to give some context to reporting on the Paris Agreement, the Paris Agreement established the ETF, which is the Enhanced Transparency Framework, which is designed to build confidence that all countries will do their part for the global effort. So this transparency framework sets out a set of rules for implementing this ETF, which are called the modalities, procedures, and guidelines. And so those are the MPGs. And these are the guidance, the rules, the steps for what you should include in your BTR, for example, what you should include in your transparency report. And so these get very specific. So we'll take a look at what some of these specific areas are for the National Inventory Report, which is one of the main chapters of the biennial transparency report. Yes, and the core element of the ETF reporting is the biennial transparency report. So this is the vehicle in which countries report how they're doing in meeting their Paris Agreement objectives. It's reported every 2 years, and the first BTR should have been submitted in 2024, and then from there, every 2 years. For developing countries and especially small island developing states, which Suriname is, you have flexibility for reporting at your discretion. So there's no set deadline, but most countries, or many countries, I should say, submitted their BTR in 2024. And it gives a chance for countries to say, every 2 years, these are the activities that we have been doing. This is the status of our greenhouse gases, adaptation, etc. So it gives a shorter timeline for countries to report on what is happening. And then every 4 years, you submit national communications, which your most recent one was in 2023, so not so long ago. And in the future, you can also decide to submit your BTR with a national communication on the years that they overlap. So if you do a BTR one, let's say this year, you can do your BTR three with your national communications in the following 4 years. And so these are the main chapters which cover the modalities, procedures, and guidelines. And these are also the main chapters of the BTR. So chapter 1 here is introductory chapter. Chapter 2, which is what we'll be talking about today, is the National Inventory Report for anthropogenic emissions and sources of removals of greenhouse gases. Chapter 3 is on tracking progress in implementing and achieving your NDC. So we won't be talking about that today, but also a very important chapter for the BTR. Chapter 4 is on climate change adaptation and impacts. 5 is on financial technology, technology development and transfer, and capacity building support provided. And then this is especially for developed countries who provide support. And then chapter 6 is for this support that is needed and received. So this is especially for developing countries who receive finance, technology, and capacity building. And then you have these other chapters that are not in the BTR but are part of the process. So just to mention, because we won't go into detail after this, the BTR, once it's submitted, is the only report actually under the Paris Agreement and under the UNFCCC process that undergoes a technical expert review. So the BTR reports and the RED Plus technical annex that are appended with the BTR reports are reviewed upon submission by technical experts, and so they can review your report and provide feedback. And then as a result, following that, then there's a session called the Facilitative Multilateral Consideration of Progress. It's a mouthful, but what that really is a session where then the country is able to do a short presentation either at the COP or at the pre-COP, the midway session in Germany, in Bonn, to present the outcomes of their BTR and to also respond to questions live. So it's an open process and a transparent process. I mentioned we'll be talking about the inventory today. Maybe just before we go, by the raise of hands, who here is familiar with greenhouse gas inventories, or who has worked on one before or heard of it before? Okay. I have a few. Anjali, German. Oh, almost everyone. This is good. We have the right people. Lalita, Priscilla, Consuela. Very good. Okay, so would you all say that you are part of the national inventory team, either for collecting data or for putting together a greenhouse gas inventory? You could raise your hand again, or you can put it in the chat. Okay. Agree. I see 5 hands. Excellent. Great. Okay, so I see something for providing data. And others I know, I heard from our colleagues from the forest department responsible for putting together the forest inventory. And I see we had some energy inventory or emissions experts as well. So that's good. In terms of the BTR and the MPGs and reporting under the Paris Agreement, the national inventory that we're talking about includes an exhaustive account of each anthropogenic greenhouse gas. So this is man-made, that's man-made or man-generated, caused by human intervention, all the different gases that are released or absorbed into the atmosphere over a specific geographical area. In this case, it's over everything that encompasses Suriname, and for a year, and generally corresponding to a calendar year. So from January to December, it counts as 1 year. And then the inventory will cover as far back as is available. So the recommended is from 1990. And for most developing countries, that is not possible. And then up to present. And for the BTR, it should be at least 2 years before the year that you report. So if you report in 2025, the last year of your data should be 2023. And for all of the different sectors. So here we have energy, forestry, all of the sectors that were mentioned by Yvette in the introduction. And some of the benefits. This is also, this is usually helpful when you are trying to get data and ask institutions for data who don't know what an inventory is. But it's to help identify which of the economic sectors have the greatest contribution to climate change, provide information for planning and evaluating economic development. So if you see that you have a lot of emissions in the transport sector, for example, which is the case, it's a way for you to plan and measure how what policies that you may need to implement to make this better for the economy or for the country, to provide information to address other environmental problems. Maybe you have air emission problems and smog, which is probably not the case. Identify gaps in national statistics, because putting a greenhouse gas inventory together is stringing together years of data. So it definitely helps in identifying where you have deficiencies in national statistics. It helps to bring organizations together that would not usually speak to each other, among other things. And then relevant to some countries who are interested, provides the basis for emission trading schemes. So if you're interested in the carbon market, carbon credits, probably especially in your forestry sector, usually it should be linked to a national greenhouse gas inventory. And so reporting under the Paris Agreement, the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory under the Paris Agreement, this is the specific article that speaks to the National Inventory Report. It says here that each party shall regularly provide a national inventory report of anthropogenic emissions and removals, etc., as using the methodologies accepted by the IPCC, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with now, and that are agreed upon by the COP. And then further on, going into the annex of this article, Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, which is the transparency article, it says here also that parties shall provide a national inventory report of emissions and sources of their GHGs. And the national inventory report consists of both a national inventory document, which is it's just to make it simple, it's the written report explaining the trends, and then also common reporting tables. And so these are the appended tables that show more details year by year of the data that was used, the numbers of the emissions provided, etc. So each submission by country should include of these two elements: a report, which has been done before, which everyone is familiar with. And then these common reporting tables, which is a new requirement. So countries have not previously needed to report tables before. So this is a new requirement. But they are simple tables, and there are ways to have them filled out, especially if you're using the IPCC software to do your inventory. There's a simple way to export, so it brings less burden on the country. And then this decision 5 here just adopts the common reporting tables. That this is the electronic reporting, and so it's the same information that would be reflected in your report. And in a schematic way, this is what it is. This is what it involves, what each country should report. Your national inventory document and your common reporting tables together. These set of colorful tables, and then this document here is the guidance, the MPGs for the national inventory document. Those two together make your national inventory report. And just to make clear that this is a separate report. So this should be a report that is separate to the BTR report, that's separate to the national communications, and they should be submitted at the same time with the BTR. So if you're familiar with the submissions or the reports that you've done before, you would see that you have a greenhouse gas inventory chapter that's within your national communications or within your BUR, your previous reports. But the recommended and actually the requirement is that you submit a separate national inventory report because it could be more in detail in terms of the data that you provided, the trends, etc. And if you wish, you can put a summary in the main BTR report or in the main national communications, or you can just refer to the separate document. That's just a side piece of information that often we get questions about. And then what you submit to the UNFCCC Secretariat for the CRTs would be a set of Microsoft Excel workbooks. So these are 60 worksheets for each reported year. So every year that you have an inventory, you have a set of background tables with the data. The green ones are of the emissions, and then the blue ones are of the trends. So for this reason, I said if you use the IPCC software, it makes this exporting of this much easier. And some of these tables are automatically generated, so it's not, you only have to fill out one set of tables for each inventory year. Okay, so let's talk about the first section of MPGs for National Inventory Report. And as you can see here, we have A, B, C, D, and E. The first one will be definitions, and then we'll take a break to see if you have any questions. And also noting that as we go along, please feel free to raise your hand or to put in the chat if you have any questions along the way, and we can always take a pause to address them. But the definitions that are used for the principles of inventories shall be the definitions provided for in the IPCC 2006 guidelines. And so it recalls the same definitions that are used in the IPCC guidance. And so these are the TAC principles. If you're familiar with these, they stand for transparency, completeness, consistency, comparability, and accuracy. And so these are indicators of inventory quality. So transparency, this means that there should be clear and sufficient documentation so that those who are not the authors of the greenhouse gas inventory would be able to understand it without searching for information elsewhere. Completeness refers to the estimates, the calculations that you made should be declared for all relevant sources and sinks across the country's entire territorial coverage. So this probably is not an issue for Suriname, but sometimes it is for multi-island states where you don't have information from all islands or from all municipalities, and also for all sectors and all categories. So if you know that you have some activity happening, but you don't have data, it's not considered complete, but you should declare what you have and don't have in your inventory. Consistency, this just refers to that estimates for each year should be done with the same methodology so that you can compare year by year without saying that you used a different methodology in 2000 versus 2023. And so this goes back to recalculation. So once you change a methodology or you update a factor, an emission factor, for example, it should be used for the entire time series. So you can compare between years. And then similarly, comparability, the inventory should be reported in a way that you can compare it with inventories of other countries. So this is the comparability between other countries, so that because at the end of the day, the Secretariat compares the inventories and the emissions from all countries to say these are the emissions in Suriname. This is for country B, country C, and you can see you can compare them because they're all using the same methodologies, the IPCC guidelines, the MPGs, etc. And accuracy, this means that your estimates should not contain excessive or insufficient estimates to the extent that is possible. So this is to eliminate bias in estimates by all costs. But for this case where you have lots of data gaps, for example, the one that you should focus on first is completeness, right? To try to get as much of the information on the relevant sources and sinks as possible, and transparency, because even if you don't have everything, then you should have clearly stated what is available and what is not available. Take a pause. Is everything clear so far on definitions?
Yes, I was about to ask a question regarding completeness, but you answered it already in your last statement. Because as you know, we have an issue with data gaps within our data. Some data are lacking, so I was wondering if that is what could be seen as incompleteness, or if it would be an issue. But as you stated, we could just report what we have, and if we don't have it, if it's lacking, we can just indicate that we will be improving that within the next reporting. So I'm not sure if that's the right answer, but that's what I got out of your statement.
That is definitely the right answer. Yeah. So your first BTR definitely does not have to be perfect. And yeah, perfectly said. You work on it for the next time. You just need to state that your improvements and your plan to work on it.
Jenny? Yeah. So just want to highlight something about the completeness. Because in Suriname, we have urban, rural, and interior. doing a survey or a census in the interior is extremely expensive. It's very expensive. So that's why most of the surveys are sometimes we don't cover the interior. So I think maybe that is what my colleague was trying to explain. And also just collecting data in Suriname, collecting environment statistics, for instance, we get a lot of data on national level, but if you want data on district level, if you want to present nice maps or graphs on a lower level, it will be hard, at least for the first BTR, because I think we need to have more training the data stakeholders how important it is to disaggregate, even if you want information by sex or age. So it's a work in progress, but for now, we do have data, but just national data, and some data will be missing. Just wanted to clarify what's the reason. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks for that, Anjali. Yeah. So it's to the extent that is possible. The requirement for your inventory is that it should be at the highest level, at the national level. And like you mentioned, if data is more challenging to get from the interior and something is not included, you state that it's not included, but it's not necessary to show the breakdown by district or by municipality. Some countries do because they're able to, but if you meet the national data, that passes the requirement and no questions asked.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
But I guess that's generally a concern that countries have to want to show it broken down by district or by municipality. Only if available. If not, it's not a problem. Okay, so the next part of the MPGs for the National Inventory Report is the section and the chapter on national circumstances and institutional arrangements. And so as part of the National Inventory document, the written part, each party should implement and maintain national inventory arrangements, including institutional, legal, and procedural arrangements. This also includes defining what your national inventory system is. And also each party shall report. And so this is one section is on what you should do, should meaning that it's encouraged. So the MPGs outline that it's recommended for countries to maintain an arrangement, a team, if you have legal arrangements to continue to do your inventory every 2 years as a recommendation. And then the next section is saying that, however, in your report, you must report the functions related to inventory planning, preparation, and management. So this includes the national entity and focal point, which we already know is the Ministry of Environment, and the inventory preparation process, archiving of information for the reported time series, and the process for official consideration. So taking it to the higher ups, to the head of the ministry, to the cabinet, presidency, etc. And this here, I don't know if I can zoom, but if you can see it clearly, but this is an example of inventory arrangement where you have the national GHG inventory management system owner, which is in the ministry, and then it breaks it down by sector. Yeah, I myself can't see this very clearly, but there you go. Now I can see it. But essentially, this is one of the main parts that you have to put in your inventory report. So this will be,
Brittany, I have a
yes.
question. If you can go a slide back in the example, it's an example, right? I was wondering what's the difference between the National Greenhouse Gas Technical Group and the National Greenhouse Gas Working Group? Is there a
Okay.
difference there? And what's the difference? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know exactly because this is an example, I believe. This is from some country. Doesn't have the country here, but
Korea, I
from
see. Is it
it's
not
from
from
Korea.
Korea? Yes.
Yes, it is from Korea. Yeah,
Okay.
I need to change my glasses. It does say Korea there. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, yes, but I imagine, and each country has a different setup, but I imagine that they have a technical working group, maybe one that provides information on research, one on emission factors, one on providing data, could be, and then the working group might be those experts who are doing the calculations, drafting the sector reports. Um, it looks like that's potentially one way. In some cases, these two groups are the same. Uh, but considering it's Korea, it might be that they have a whole separate section for research and data. But
Okay.
this could
Great.
look
Thank you.
but this could look different for every country. So, for example, for Suriname, it would be the coordinating team at the ministry, and then perhaps you have some consultants maybe here at the or right below it, and then you may have a set of data providers for each sector. And then you may have some of those data providers also being the inventory leads for each sector, or that might be outsourced to a consultant or to a different working group. So it could look different, but the idea is that you should report on what it looks like for the inventory at the time, and then also uh, work on explaining what would be some of the arrangements for subsequent inventories to keep the process continuous every 2 years. And it's considered good practice that countries improve the quality of the greenhouse gas inventory on a continuous basis. And I know that this is the case for Suriname to continue with the capacity to be able to do it and also to improve on the data that is available. And it's generally accepted that the inventory should be useful to users if they are updated on a regular basis, and there should be improvement over time to provide increasingly useful information on greenhouse gas trends and transparent reporting. So as you go over time, it will be easier to identify trends or to um, you know pull trends and send them to the different stakeholders that they relate to or the different sectors. And then over time, establishing a sustainable national GHG inventory arrangement or a system, national inventory system, will help to continuously uh, improve inventories. And sometimes for some countries, this includes uh, hiring a team or having it written in law, which they do, for example, here in Chile, in this example here. They have it written in their law that certain data providers should provide data at this time of the year, and then they also have written into their public servant system that they have a coordinating team that should always be staffed to be able to coordinate year in, year out. It might not be so fixed and perfect for all countries, but we should work towards something that is permanent, so that it gets easier year by year. And these are the key elements of the inventory arrangements. And this is an example of the common reporting table that you use for outlining what your inventory arrangements are. So identify the objectives that will help identify the objectives that will help define your inventory's data, expertise needed, roles and responsibilities. So You can put here for each type of category, what's the availability of the geographical resolution, the time series that you have this data, who is responsible, etc. And some of the key areas of structuring your institutional arrangements, clarifying some of these main roles to help formalize and communicate. So it could be that you have an example here where this is you have your inventory arrangement or your inventory system as a part of a larger statistical data gathering operation, which means that you may collect data all at once. Maybe it's one main agency that's collecting data, or it could be spread out. But these are some of the main roles. So you may have a steering committee or a higher body that inventory users can review. They can review the data, review the report. You have your single national entity, so the government ministry or agency responsible for putting the inventory together, etc. Then you may have further into management and coordination. So this is usually your BTR coordinator, your inventory compiler or coordinator. And then you may have also compilation sector experts. So this could be the case that for each sector you have a compiler putting inventory by sector, and then you have the coordinator compiling it. And then below that is the data providers. Yes, question. I see a hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. It's more a statistical question. Is there a specific list of indicators for the specific areas, like so that if, for instance, we have the statistical law, if the National Statistical Office has to help, for instance, for collecting the data, we could write letters to the various institutes. That is what we do when we collect data. I already collect some data, but maybe there is more data needed that I'm not collecting. And if there is a specific list of indicators and statistics, extra indicators and statistics that need to be collected, we could, at least I could try to, ask these stakeholders, because of our statistical act, they have to give us the data if it's available. But I'm just, maybe you have it by the later in your presentation. Maybe I'm just a little bit ahead, but it's always clear to know what exactly do you want me to measure. So I'm just wondering.
No, that's an excellent question. And I think that would also help with the institutionalization of, the inventory system over time. So we won't get into all of the indicators today because for each of the sessions, we'll be looking at the data required or the data indicators by sector. But yes, there's a set of data requirements is what they're called, but they're essentially indicators that you can ask by sector. So it could be head count of livestock, etc. too.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, I think that'd be a great exercise to see what is already being requested, and then if there are others that are missing, maybe especially those areas that are challenging to get data, to perhaps include in those surveys. Okay, so we will move on from inventory management and get into some other areas, but these are some of the tools that are available for ensuring the efficiency and transparency of inventory compilation. So if you put together an inventory before, you'll know that it takes a lot of work and a lot of planning, because you have to plan with a lot of data providers and different sectors to collect data for many years. So it's important to use some work plans to plan your inventory process from kickoff to meetings, to understanding who is responsible for what. And then data management system, so to understand and identify where data will be saved so that you can access this data in the next year or the next 2 years. Management of quality assurance and quality control documentation. This is another part of the MPGs that's a requirement. It's an encouragement for developing countries, but we should have a QA/QC system or plan in place where those who are providing data or those who are writing the report can check to see if they have met all the requirements before submitting. And then follow-up activities for training and capacity building for the team, especially as new members might be joining. And public awareness to access the information once you submit it. Okay, we will pass this exercise just because we have some more material to cover, but you can think about this, and this might be a session for the colleagues at the ministry to identify the inventory arrangements. Who's the entity? Who's the inventory coordinator? Maybe actually in the chat, you can identify which one of these areas that you identify with the most. If you're the coordinating entity, if you're the inventory coordinator specifically, if you're responsible for putting an inventory by sector expert, or data provider, or a part of the higher committee for reviewing or approving. Okay. And in the same way, another exercise on management tools, but we'll pass on this one just for now. But if you know your role in this process, go ahead and put it in the chat. I think it would be helpful. And also for me, moving on. Okay. Okay, so I see we have from SBB, data provider and compilation of Volu sector. Very important. Okay, so the next section that we'll be looking at is methods, and we'll be looking at them from the high view, because each of these sections can go much more into detail. But the idea is that you get an idea of what is required to put in the inventory. So we'll go over methodologies, parameters, data needed. This might answer some of the questions that our colleague just asked. Key category analysis, time series, consistency, uncertainty assessment, and quality control. So the methodologies and parameters used are the IPCC guidelines. And you can raise your hand again if you know and have been familiar with these IPCC 2006 guidelines. This stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and essentially the UNFCCC has requested that the scientific body create these guidelines and continue to update. So they're independent of UNFCCC, independent of the Paris Agreement system, but they produce the science, and so they produce the methodologies to put the inventories together. And so within these parties, so the parties must, as a requirement, use the IPCC 2006 guidelines. And in the event that there's something in the guidelines that does not is not relevant to the country, and the country has another methodology that it uses, you may use another methodology, but you shall clearly document the reason that you made that choice. I don't think this is the case for Suriname. I think with the exception of some higher tier methods used in the forestry sector. And then parties should prioritize for future improvements any key categories that they identified. So we'll look over key categories in a few. And each party is encouraged to use country-specific and regional emission factors and activity data. So this is an encouragement. So the IPCC guidance provides default emission factors where you may not have country-specific related emission factors, but in your case, you have country-specific activity data. So that's already good. And this is the very simple methodological approach for putting for calculating emissions. So for each gas, so you have various greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide being the main ones. So for each gas, you multiply the activity data. So this is the human activity that takes place, the activity data related to that activity, whether it's perhaps a number of livestock in the country, and then you multiply that with the emission factor. So this is the coefficient which quantifies how much emissions are involved in that activity, how much emissions, how much carbon dioxide or methane emissions results from a milking cow, a cow that's used for milk or beef. And when you multiply those, you get the emissions of that specific gas. Yes, Sherman.
Yes, so for cattle and for energy, this is a bit clear for me. But when it comes to IPPU, the different companies and the different activities and processes they have, that's where it gets complicated for me to separate activity data from other information. So for me to identify what exactly would be the activity data, for example, for a company which produces ice cream or something, maybe a full soft drink, maybe soft drinks will be also something I could figure out myself. But if they use, for example, sugar to produce ice cream, what would be the activity data in such a industrial process? Because the IPPU is the industrial process and product use. So the process and also the use of the products where emissions take place. So that's where I have issues understanding or identifying the activity data. So if you could speak on that a little, please.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Sherman. This is a very important very important thing that you just said. This here is the very basic concept. So this looks very different for forestry sector. It looks very different, like you mentioned, for IPPU sector. So important to note when we're not sure what the activity data is that we need, we go back to the IPCC guidance. And I do this. I do this very often because it's confusing in many cases. So, like for example, sugar, like you mentioned, for IPPU, this would be the process to produce sugar. If you're a sugar producer, then it would be then the IPCC has factors for emission factors for sugar that's being produced. So it would be either tons, kilograms, volume of sugar produced. It's different now if you're using sugar to make ice cream. Only if the sugar was made in the country, then you use the sugar, the consumption of the production of that sugar. So for example, there's a section in IPPU called food and beverage. Uh, Actually, the IPCC guidance does not account for all of the different food and beverage. They have, for example, all of the alcohols made. So if you produce beer, wine, spirits, etc., rum, this would be one of the main ones, and the activity data that you would use for that is the volume that is produced per year, and then you would find the relative emission factor. For soft drinks. I actually went to look for that recently. I didn't find an emission factor for production of soft drinks. But I imagine it's because the process for creating a soft drink does not produce emissions by producing it in itself. It would be more on the energy for production, or for example, if you if you make plastic for bottles, which I don't think you do. So it's dependent on the activity. So for example, if you make bottles or make what's the plastic called, PVC or PCP for bottles, then that's the activity that you estimate emissions for, but not necessarily like the mixing of sugar syrups for the soft drink itself. So I agree that it's tricky for some activities. But I think the first one of the main steps that you as a country would need to do would be to look at the list of um, activities under IPPU and see where you have where you fit, right? So maybe for rum, for some spirits, uh, not sugar producer anymore, is what I remember. Um, but start with that, and then of course um, if you have other activities, then you go from there from product use. Product use would be more like refrigerants. That's the product use that's usually referred to in the IPPU. I hope that
Okay.
answered some of your question, but we'll
Yes,
definitely.
yes. So it helped a little, but I think I have to gain more experience to better, um, differentiate and identify the difference between those. So, but it helped a little. It clarified a little bit of my confusion. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll definitely go more into what are the specific data requirements for each sector when we go into the sector session. So we'll focus mainly on the data requirements. I think that will help for all of the sectors. But we'll spend more time then. Um, okay, thanks very much, and thanks everyone for putting their what they do in the chat, their how they fit into the inventory system. Okay, so moving on to methodological tiers. I spoke a little bit about this, but a tier represents the level of methodological complexity, and there are three tiers provided in the IPCC guidance. So from your last inventory, from your third national communication, Suriname had tier 1 for most sectors, and then higher tiers, tier 2 and 3 for land use change. So this was above ground biomass and some other, I think some other portion of below ground biomass. So this comes to play when you have more information, more studies done, and it's Suriname's case in the forestry sector is where you can use where, because you have this information, you're using a higher methodological complexity and you're getting truer to what the actual emission is for that activity. So that's very good. So that's always the goal, to go higher in tier. And then a very, very general methodological approach that this is just a summary of all of the different sectors. We won't go into detail in sectors today, but for energy, general methodological approach is based on carbon content of fuel. So how much carbon is in each fuel is resulting in the emissions. For industrial processes and product use, it's based on the chemistry of the process. So like this is where the emissions come from. So it comes from the chemistry of producing sugar, the chemical process that is used for making sugar, as opposed to bottling soft drinks where there's not a chemical process. And some use mass balance of product use. So this is generally for refrigerants. So how much refrigerants are discharged per year, and you account for the balance that's used for each year. On agriculture, based on understanding of processes, so it's usually referring to different rumination processes in certain animals. Gases are produced in their digestive system. So it's all based dependent on the process or on how gases react in soils. And as a result, have gases going into the atmosphere. For land use change, and forestry based on stock changes. So emissions and removals from stock changes from when you have somewhere that's very forested to when that stock is cleared, then you remove carbon from the atmosphere. So you have emissions and removals in that way. Also with soils, where you may have periods of decay or periods of harvest in agriculture that have emission balances changing even within a year. And then waste tracks carbon, how much carbon is in each type of waste product, and sometimes how it's treated, right? Whether it's burned or digested, etc. Moving along. Okay. So the other section, the other part of methodologies is key category analysis. And I mentioned we won't go into how this is done specifically because it would need more time. But essentially, the key category analysis is whereby you identify your key categories, and this is a shall. So this is a necessary requirement where the country identifies what are the key emitters of gases or removals of gases. And so essentially you tally up your inventory for the year, and then you can see which were the highest contributors. And so those that meet 95% threshold of your highest emitters and removals will be your key categories. And those are the ones that you would need to focus on, either for policy for your country, probably transport, so the forestry will be in there, for you to focus on to either improve data or to implement policy, etc., because they have the highest impact. So just to note here that parties that need flexibility have flexibility to identify key categories no lower than a threshold of 85% in place of 95%. So this allows for a focus on fewer categories and prioritizing less resources. To do the analysis is the same level of effort, but the difference here is that if you choose a 85% threshold, you don't have to improve or prioritize as many categories. Oops. So I specified this already. The idea is that you identify the categories that have the highest influence on the country's total inventory, and in general, more detailed and higher methods should be selected for key categories moving forward. And this is an example of, this is just of how it would look in the report, for example. This is of a level assessment. This means that you take a look of all the emissions for the year, for the year, and you see by gas, and you put them in descending order so that you can see how much it's going. So you do the emissions and removals, you make the absolute, you turn it into absolute numbers. So you remove the plus and the minus, and then you find out what the percentage is. As you can see there, fuel combustion for energy is 47%. And then you put them in in descending order. So in order of magnitude. So then you can see that these three here account for the 95%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 categories, sorry, lead up to the 98%. And these are the 5 that should be focused on. Suriname did do this for your last inventory. You did do this, so I think it shouldn't be a challenge to do it again. You can also do this in the IPCC software. Okay. Let me try to move through some of these sections a little bit more. This is just a requirement for time series consistency, and so parties should use the same methods used for activity data and emission factors for each reported year. So I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the TAC principles. And in the event that you don't have all of the data available, each party should use surrogate data techniques, gap filling techniques to fill in this data. So you see here, you have a couple examples of that. In the slides that I will share full slides that have examples of these techniques, of these splicing techniques, so that you can see some examples in the event that you ever encounter this. So you have interpolation, extrapolation, surrogate method. And so, for example, these are some of the slides that I will share so that you can have this information on interpolation technique, for example, for exactly how to do it and how to fill in these gaps. Okay, another area that is required in the National Inventory Report is the uncertainty assessment. This was also, Suriname, you all also did this for your last inventory in your third national communication. So it says here that each party shall quantitatively estimate and qualitatively discuss the uncertainty of emission and removal estimates. So what this means is that with each emission source and sink that you estimate, there's a level of uncertainty, a plus minus percentage of, I would say, accuracy of or sureness that this value is true. And so usually have this information when you receive data from statistical offices, usually have a plus minus percentage of accuracy or of uncertainty related to that specific data. In some cases, it is not available. But the IPCC guidance also provides some estimates for what these ranges can be. I personally don't think they're always relevant, but so that's why, to the extent that is possible, to ask when you're collecting your data, ask if this uncertainty data is available so that you can do this assessment. However, it is noted here that this requirement has a flexibility provision. So this means that parties that need flexibility can provide this information at minimum as a qualitative discussion for key categories. So you can just look at your key categories that you did and say, for example, you estimate that the information that's provided is mostly true or mostly certain, etc., and discuss what you think it is without showing the numbers. That is an option, and then to improve on it for the next session, the next report. Many countries, developing countries, choose to apply flexibility for this provision because it's already challenging to collect data on its own, and sometimes it's even more challenging to get this uncertainty information. Okay. And moving on to assessment of completeness under methodologies. This is referring to where sources and sinks that are occurring in the country uh, that are included in the IPCC guidelines. If something is not reported, what should you put in their place? So you should use these notation keys where numerical data is not available when completing your tables and indicating reasons for why these emission sources or sinks are are not reported. So for example, the main ones are not estimated, which means that these emissions are happening in the country, but are not reported, have not been estimated or reported, for which the activity may occur within the country. So something is happening, but you don't have information to report it. You would put not estimated, or even if it's for a year, even if maybe you have information for a certain amount of time, but you don't have information for a couple years, you put NE and you explain why. Maybe it's a hurricane, maybe it's something happened. Included elsewhere, this means that if you have emissions and removals for this activity are estimated and included in the inventory, but are not presented, are presented within like another sector, within another category. Sometimes this happens for or in the energy sector when it's difficult to combine to disaggregate fuel consumption for different activities. Maybe not transport, but for example, domestic and industrial fuel use. Sometimes you can't differentiate it, so you put it. It's included elsewhere. Confidential information, where this is usually for information that is perhaps military related, or it's confidential maybe from a specific industry. Emissions and removals are included elsewhere because it can't report it at a disaggregated level, could lead to disclosure of confidential information. Importantly here, which would be very common for your inventory, would be not applicable. This means that the activity or category exists, but relevant emissions and removals are never occur or not considered to occur. And so these are usually kind of shaded out in the tables. And another which may occur frequently is not occurring, which means that the process or activity does not exist within a country. So when you have the big CRT tables, and it will show all of the options of available emission and removal sources, where they don't apply, you decide on which of these notation keys should be used. Another time we'll do an activity on notation keys, but here we are. Okay, and we'll move on to this last section on methodologies, which is QA/QC. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that QA/QC, each party shall elaborate an inventory QA/QC plan. We have flexibility as developing countries and as SIDS to, there's an encouragement to elaborate on this QA/QC plan. If this is not actively in place, you can apply flexibility and state that you're working on one, but you don't need to report on it. But for the rest of countries, yes, they need to report on their QA/QC plan, which states the system they have in place for check and balances, for entering data, for putting their report together, etc. Emission factors, activity data. The second part is that each party shall implement and provide information on general QC procedures. So this is in the same way. QC refers to the activities that are done while preparing the inventory. So this is important to ensure that you have the correct data in place, that you have all of the sectors accounted for, but you also have flexibility there. So this is another area that that if you don't have all your QA/QC activities in place, you can apply this flexibility. And I know we're coming to the end, but I really wanted to show here what were some of the general improvements from Suriname's third national communication from the inventory. And this is a good place to start when looking at when we're preparing the following inventory, right? This one in the BTR. So improve activity data collection and raising awareness among inventory stakeholders. So I think this is some work that's being done to address that. Formalize collection of activity data through instruments, through specific instruments. Maybe it could be through the national statistical instruments or other instruments. So then some ideas to be discussed. Capacity building program for collecting and storing activity data. Yes, so this also links to this one here on inventory database, where this data will be stored. More in-depth sessions on using the IPCC software, developing a comprehensive QA/QC plan. So these are all excellent points that are good starting places for improvements in following cycles. So once there's a plan in place to address these, we can do them little by little. Yes, Anjali.
I also wanted to maybe add another point. I don't know if you're familiar with our Dondru database. It's our climate change database. It has it's a very nice database, but it needs to be updated. So we need to add data from our third national communication, and we could keep using this, how you call it? It's a database slash data repository for our climate change information. I'm going to put the link for you in the chat. But something
Perfect.
we can use.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. No, I'm not familiar with it, but I think that's probably an excellent resource for adding this type of information to it. This is specific to inventory, but if there is space for it to be added to that, then I think that's a great idea. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that in the chat. So I just wanted to show you these because this comes specifically from what were identified from the last inventory. And so now that you're moving into this next phase, it would be good to start from some of these same areas of improvement. Okay. We're almost there to the end. If you give me 10 minutes, I think I can finish, and there'll still be a little bit of time for discussion. Okay, some of us have to leave. Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining. Yes. Okay. But we're really coming to the end, and these are the metrics that we're using. If you're using the IPCC guidance, you're using the metrics for the global warming potential. Each party shall use those that are in the fifth assessment report, the IPCC AR5, and you can find these here. This is the list of what the global warming potential of each of the greenhouse gases are. I will put in the chat this exercise because I think this is important for those who will be working on the inventory to do an assessment of the reporting requirements. So this checklist that I put in the chat. It's called the BTR checklist for the National Inventory Report. Is the list of all of the MPGs that we've gone through so far. And you can check off whether the data is available, can be produced, and whether there are any capacity constraints or flexibilities applied. So we've gone through some of the flexibilities already. And what are the areas of improvement? So I think this is also a good exercise to do as you're planning your new phase. And it would also be helpful to report in your BTR what are the flexibilities, and maybe some of the gaps.
Sorry, Brittany. The document you shared, I can't open it. I'm not sure why. It says open with the email it was shared with, something
Okay.
in that line of
Same with
sense.
me. And also,
Okay. Yeah, so I might just need to share it by email if it's
yes,
because I guess, yeah, it might be sharing from see if you can do this one now. That one is linked to my OneDrive, but this one you might be able to download. If not, I can share by email. No problem.
this one doesn't
Yeah, but
also. It's asking for a link. Second
permission.
one.
Okay. No problem. I will send it by email so that you all can have it. And it's so that you have a summary in a couple of pages of all of the requirements, and then you can also check off by sector which areas you have available, which data is available. This we went through already for reporting guidance. So you must provide your national inventory document and your reporting tables, common reporting tables. And we went through a bit of the cross-cutting elements already. So in your report, you include the report methods you used, which parts of the IPCC guidance you use. You provide information on emission factors and activity data used. This is often a common mistake. Sometimes we just report on the emissions, but for reproducibility or for comparability and consistency, it's good to include activity data that you use specifically for each sector and the emission factors, so that if you need to reproduce it, someone can. Describe the key categories, self-explanatory. And then what are the priorities you have for those key categories? And some of the other areas are reporting on recalculations. So this is the only one that we didn't go through so far. So recalculations, every time you do an inventory, in the event that there is some method change or there's some new emission factor used, it's recommended that you do a recalculation from the starting year, that the first year that you have your inventory, so that all subsequent years follow the same methodologies and the same trends. And then on gases, each party shall report on these 7 greenhouse gases, these 7 here. So you have your carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and then you have your fluorinated gases. These are from your refrigerants and product use. So, however, there is flexibility that you can report on at least 3 gases and 3 greenhouse gases. So carbon dioxide, methane, and N2O. And then if you are reporting on HFCs, PFCs, you shall report the actual emissions of the gases. So what this means is that you put the emissions of the gases and then also providing data on their CO2 equivalent. So the amount of gas in by gas by CO2, methane, etc. And then you also convert them to carbon dioxide equivalent so that you can compare the gases under one unit, which is what each gas would be equivalent in carbon dioxide. And then, of course, reporting for all sectors. Didn't go through this, but there is also some options, encouragement to report indirect carbon dioxide, and also report on international aviation and marine bunker fuels. And so this is outside of national emissions. So this is the international emissions that occur when you have flights that are from internationally Suriname to outside, or for boats or marine vessels that start in Suriname and end somewhere else. But what is accounted for in national emissions would be domestic flights and boats. Yeah, and then these are just some other notes on feedstocks, on harvested wood products. These are some other specifications of what should be reported. And lastly, we have time series. So Suriname's time series currently is from 2000 to 2023. It says here the requirement is that parties shall report starting from 1990, but you have flexibility. So you can start from the year of your discretion, but the minimum should be that you start at a reference year starting at your NDC, which is I think 2015. And then in addition, a consistent annual time series from 2020 onwards. So you're already surpassing this flexibility, but you're starting from 2000. And then the end date of your time series I mentioned earlier should be 2 years prior to the submission of your national inventory report. So if you're submitting your report in 2025, your last year of data should be 2023. However, you have flexibility as SIDS to report the year that you're submitting -3. So it could be up to minimum 2022, for example, if you submit this year. These are the tables that you indicate what your flexibilities that you'll be using. We went over these as we went along each section, but when I share these slides, you'll get to look at all of the flexibilities that you can apply, that you have the right to apply for your inventory. And I think this might make it easier for you to get your inventory done, knowing that you don't have to make it perfect. You have the right to apply flexibility. And just to finish off, I think you're already on this path with your BTR. You have your green light. You have your resources available. At this point, you're taking stock of the human resources, the team that you need, the data, and you're building on your chapters. And I think you're starting with your inventory chapter. And the next step will be to decide on what these chapters will look like and what flexibilities that you'll use. Because once you determine what flexibilities you'll use, you'll know that you can focus more on one thing than the other. And then just start. That's always the recommendation. Your BTR doesn't have to be perfect. And that's not just coming from me, that's coming from the UNFCCC. They've said that repeatedly, that your first BTR doesn't have to be perfect, just to start. You can always improve over time. We'll share these with you. You have various other tools that are available for preparing your BTR. Look at others. There are countries that have submitted their BTRs. CBIT-GSP has a national inventory document template, which is actually like a draft national inventory report that you can then just add your national context, add your tables. It's actually very nice for you to get started for your inventory compiler. And I will also share that with you by email. Yeah, and these are just some other tips to prioritize your national systems. You already have your list of improvements from your last inventory. That's a great place to start. Yeah, and then you work on formalizing your roles and responsibilities, and things will get easier in the future. But for now, that's it for now. I know we're ending a little bit late, but there is room for questions if you all still have any questions or comments on the requirements.